guys, for reading today, we're going to reread a little bit of our Harry Houdini Master of Magic, and we're going to be focusing on summarizing. Again, I'm trying to make these videos a little bit shorter so they're easier to watch. So I'm going to jump right into it and speak a little bit fast. I did post a video our first week about how to change the playback speed of a video. So if you need to make this slower so that you can hear and understand, totally fine. Go watch that video if you don't know how to do it, or just slow it down. I'm going to try and speak a little fast so that the time of this video isn't quite as long. So I'm going to reread the same part we read yesterday, but this time, every time we stop, I want you to write down what do you think is the most important part to understand or remember from the part that we just read. So not from the whole story, but from the little bit that we just read, what was the most important part to understand or remember? If you remember, before we moved to online school, we did this with A River Ran Wild, where every time we stopped, we wrote a sentence or two, the most important part about it, and that helped us to turn our writing into a summary of the story. So we're going to kind of try and do that today. First, we're going to get those sentences down today, and then tomorrow we'll work on turning it into an actual summary, and a paragraph or two that can kind of explain all the different paragraphs that we read in the story. So go ahead and get either a piece of paper out or open the note up on Seesaw so that whenever we pause and stop, you can pause and stop, and go and answer the question. So I'm going to run through this pretty quick. I apologize for having to read fast, but I don't want to waste any of your guys' time. Okay? So I'm rereading the part that we read yesterday. Number 1, The Great Houdini. The new safe stood on the stage of the Euston Palace Theatre in London. Its door swung wide open. Harry Houdini, the young American magician, got ready to step inside. He was wearing only a bathing suit. London newspapers had printed these bold headlines. Houdini challenges safe maker, offers to escape the safe before theater audience. The year was 1904. The people watching from the audience were excited. The air in the safe will only last a few minutes, one man said. He'll die if he doesn't get out fast. It's impossible. How could anyone escape from a locked safe? Houdini can. On the stage, Houdini shook hands with men who had come up from the audience. They had looked over the safe to make sure it was in good working order. A doctor had examined Houdini. He had even asked the magician to open his mouth. No tools, he told the audience, nothing on him. Then Houdini said, shaking hands with the last man, let me enter the safe. Lock the door behind me. Okay, this is our first stopping point. Go and write down what you think the most important part to understand or remember just from that section I just read. Most important part to understand or remember. Pause the video, go write that right now. Okay, if you're back, then we're ready to do the next section. Then Houdini said, shaking hands with the last man, let me enter the safe. Lock the door behind me. The heavy steel door clanged shut. A screen was placed around the safe. As the men left the stage, the orchestra played soft music. The audience settled back in their seats to wait. They watched the screen. A half hour passed. The people began to grow restless. How can he possibly get out? A woman asked. One man thought he knew the answer. Houdini isn't like the rest of us, he whispered. He has supernatural powers. He can change himself into a spirit and slip between the cracks of the door, just like smoke. The woman looked at him. I don't believe that. Believe me, the man said, turning away. It's true. 40 minutes passed. Open the door, someone yelled. He's dead and can't get out. A woman screamed and fainted. 45 minutes. People were whistling and stamping. A man stood and shook his fist. Let him out. He needs help. At that moment, Houdini stepped from behind the screen. A great sigh swept through the audience. There he is! He's alive! Men rushed onto the stage to inspect the safe. The door's locked. Houdini smiled and bowed to the cheering people. How do you escape from a steel safe? No one in the audience that night guessed the answer. The fact was that Houdini had escaped in just 14 minutes. He had been sitting behind the screen for almost a half hour while the audience's excitement grew. Okay, this is our second stop. This is where you're going to go and answer that same question. What do you think is the most important part to understand or remember just from the section we just read? So from where we read, let me enter the safe, lock the door behind me. We read all that to, he had been sitting behind the screen for almost a half hour while their excitement grew. Pause the video, go answer that part now. Okay, next part. Many years ago, before movies, radio, or TV, Harry Houdini was the greatest magician and escape artist in the world. Some people thought he was born with magical powers, but this was not true. He became a master magician only after long years of hard work. In fact, he began working toward his goal when he was a boy. Houdini's real name was Eirik Weiss. He was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1874, the third of 5 children of Mayor Samuel and Cecilia Weiss. Shortly after Eirik's death, Samuel Weiss brought his family to America. They made their home in Appleton, Wisconsin. Samuel Weiss was a rabbi, the religious leader of the Jewish people in Appleton. His congregation was small and couldn't pay Rabbi Weiss enough to support his wife and children. As they grew up, Eirik and his brothers had to earn money for the family by shining shoes and selling newspapers. Okay, third pause. Go and tell me what was the most important part to understand or remember from this section. Okay, if you're back, then we're ready for the fourth section. When Eirik wasn't working or going to school, he practiced doing tricks. At the age of 9, he hung ropes from a tree branch in his backyard. Then he tied a wooden bar to the ropes. He learned to do such good stunts on the homemade trapeze that one of his friends asked him to be in his 5-cent circus. Feeling like a real circus star, Eirik called himself the Prince of the Air. He loved the clapping and cheering of the boys and girls who watched him. He also practiced rope escapes. He put his hands behind his back and let friends tie his wrists together with the rope. After a few minutes, he held up the rope. His friends were all amazed. How had he escaped? Eirik only smiled. He had already learned the first rule of being a magician. Never tell how you do a trick. Mother Weiss was amazed at another trick her son had learned. Pieces of her apple cake began to disappear, so she hid the cake in a cupboard and locked the door. The cake still vanished. One day, after several cakes had disappeared, she found out where they went. Her son had a new interest, picking locks. The small lock on her cupboard door was easy to open with a bent piece of wire. That doesn't surprise me, the town locksmith said. He had heard about Eirik's trick. That boy has been coming to my shop for weeks. He can pick any lock in the place. Okay, fourth stop. The most important part to understand or remember just from this section. Pause the video and go right. Okay, fifth section. He can pick any lock in the place. In 1887, when Eirik was 13, Rabbi Weiss moved his family to New York. There were more Jewish people there, and Rabbi Weiss hoped to start a small religious school. But he became ill and could do nothing to support his wife and 5 children. To help his sick father, Eirik took whatever job he could find. During one Christmas season, he worked as a package delivery boy for a large store. One day, he lettered a card and pinned it to his hat. Christmas is coming, turkeys are fat, please drop a quarter in the messenger boy's hat. That evening, he stood in front of his mother. Shake me, he said, I'm magic. As she shook her son, Mrs. Weiss's eyes opened wide. Quarters dropped out of her son's sleeves and fell onto her lap. Eirik, she exclaimed in German, the language that she always spoke. There's enough money to pay rent this week. She hugged her hard-working son. After Christmas, Eirik looked for another job. As he walked along Broadway, he came upon a line of boys in front of a small factory. H. Richter's Sons. A sign in the window read, Assistant Necktie Cutter Wanted. Eirik was only 14 years old, but he boldly walked to the head of the line. He took the sign off the door. The job is taken, he told the boys. Thank you for waiting. His bluff worked. He got the job and stayed at H. Richter's Sons for the next 2.5 years. During these years, Eirik practiced magic in his spare time. He did card tricks and trick rope ties. He read books on magic and gave magic shows to neighborhood clubs. He called himself Cardo, or Eric the Great. These clubs paid Eirik a few dollars for each show. Mother Weiss was always waiting for the extra money to buy medicine for Papa, who was sick in bed, to put food on the table, and to pay the rent. The money helped, but magic was only a hobby. Eirik never thought about making a living doing tricks. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Fifth stop. Go and tell me the most important part to understand and remember from this section. Okay. If you're back, we're ready for the last part. Chapter 2, Behold, a Miracle. One day when Eirik was 16, he went into a bookstore. Looking along the shelves, he came across an old book on the life of Robert Houdin. It was a moment that changed his life. Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin was the greatest magician in France. He performed before the French Emperor and before England's Queen Victoria. He pulled cannonballs from an empty hat. He made trees grow fruit on the stage. He even floated ladies in midair. Eirik spent the night reading Robert Houdin's life story. The next morning, his mother found him in bed, still reading. Eirik, she scolded, so much reading will hurt your eyes. Mother, Eirik said, please, never mind my eyes. I am reading the most important book of my life. So, Mother Weiss said, what makes this book so important at 6 o'clock in the morning? Eirik held up the book. This man, Robert Houdin has made me see that I can make magic my life's work. If he did it, so can I. Mother Weiss's eyebrows lifted. A fine thought, Eirik, but can you make money doing magic? Remember poor Papa, he was unable to work for us. There's the rent to pay, we must eat. Eirik stared at the book. I don't know how much money I can make, but I want to become a magician, just like Robert Houdin. Within a few days, Eirik left his job at H. Richter's Sons. He also made another important change. To honor his hero, he decided to change his name to Houdini. Since friends called him Irie, which sounded like Harry, he became Harry Houdini. He was 17 years old. Okay, that is the whole reading for today. At the end of this section, go and answer the same question. What was the most important part to remember or understand? And make sure that if you're writing this on paper, don't lose it. We'll need it tomorrow. If you're writing this on Seesaw, make sure you take a screenshot or something of your writing so that you can look back at it tomorrow. We're going to use the sentences we wrote today to help work on our stuff tomorrow. So check in on Seesaw, see if there's anything else on this assignment. I might have added 1 or 2 sentences telling you what to do next. But good job today, guys.